Morning, all. Thank you for having me here. Kathy and Deb, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I hope you got a little bit of a theme we're going with, and that accuracy and perfusion, and kind of needling down on this. What I'd like to do today, as kind of the last week of our group, is kind of needle down a little further on some of the kind of the technical aspects of how we achieve some of our processes here. No disclosures. We talked about this case a little bit. I talked about this case last year, and I kind of posed the question: why would we treat an 800-gram preemie different than we would that 70-year-old rig replacement or valve replacement? There's no difference. The accuracy and precision that is required for that patient can be translated to any patient, every patient. So, couple definitions: accuracy, that conformity to truth or to a standard or model, that goal we have set in reaching that exact goal. Now, precision as well, the degree of refinement with which an operation is performed or a measurement stated. So getting that goal, staying within ranges, and making the, if you will, bringing the navigation buoys in as close as possible to maintain those strict standards. Kind of the philosophy I think about this is maintaining that homeostasis is required to come out of that OR with the optimal patient outcome possibles. I also kind of like this to the idea of it's our job as perfusionists to maintain that homeostasis to a level of allowing the patient and the surgeon to forget their own bypass so they can optimize that surgery for the best outcome. So this is what I'm talking about, this little spot right here. We need to really kind of hone in our crosshairs on what that looks like: precise precision and accuracy. What can we do to affect those arenas? Let's talk about a few of those. Prime is one of the primary access points where we can optimize things. Pressure, natural pressure, perfusion pressure. Flow, where do we need to be? Then also what we can do to mitigate the inflammation and serous process. So this is just a mantra that we've been running on for years, decades, kind of beat into us by our founding father, Chuck Frazier, and perfusionals for him as well. Perfect prime every time. No question, there's no doubt it's going to be perfect every time. We're talking about electrolyte balanced, pH matched, hemoglobin hematocrit appropriate for every patient. Not just a kind of, appropriately documented in literature, nadir hematocrit, but what is appropriate for that patient. And promise you, some of these adult and general patients that come into the OR, hematocrit of 65, if you take them down below at some levels, you will see an effect that you cannot manage. Also, I'm going to harp on this point a little bit. Call it osmotic pressure. I think this is the key point that sometimes we negate in some of our larger patients that I think is very important what we do. This is kind of a graphic representation of what I'm talking about in portions. So in our very smallest patients, we're talking about a prime to blood volume ratio of 1, potentially 2. So that's an important ratio that we have to understand. On some of our smallest patients, just by going on bypass, you're doing an exchange trend. So that's very important to understand that. Now, in our larger patients, someone standing in your OR like me, you're closer to a 20% ratio. So that's reasonable to understand, but does not negate the precision and accuracy that we need to provide those patients. So prime, we're well understanding that using primarily crystalloids to prime, or only crystalloids to prime, are going to increase your interstitial fluids, reduce your oxygen delivery to the patient's vital tissues, and cause all sorts of problems downstream. Colloids. So this is a paramount point, important, once again, to maintain osmotic pressure. And just because I like to say the word a lot, I'm going to talk briefly about endothelial glycocalyx. It's just fun to say. So anyway, I'll touch base on that a little bit later. We used to be able to use metastarch, very valuable solution that we could use to maintain osmotic pressure. Recently, it's been removed from the market for some renal concerns. So what we have left is albumin. And mind you, it has its own little set of problems. You'll notice on the label there, it says human. That's right. You're basically doing a transfusion every time you deliver this product. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. But it's what we have, I think, it's an important component of the prime. Ironically, back in 2020, adult clinical perfusion practice survey demonstrated that only about 47% of our adult colleagues are utilizing albumin in their prime. That was interesting and something that might be considered for some of my adult colleagues. So this is an example of our prime that we're using for our adult patients, totaling of about 1,200 cc's. We start out with a base of plasma A as that balanced electrolyte solution. We utilize a touch of half normal saline, adding in appropriate amounts of albumin, and then buffering the solution with sodium bicarbonate. Kind of going back up, that's exactly why we use that half normal, to lower the sodium predictably, so we can then add in albumin, which is very high in sodium, and also the required buffer, which also, once dissociated, elevates the sodium as well. So we start out with a lower sodium and end up with the ideal sodium. Of course, heparinizing and adding a bit of calcium to maintain cardiac stability. So real quick, we always try to aim for a 5% solution that is the same 5% solution albumin in human plasma. Easy calculations to do that, to get that 240 cc of your 25% albumin. So mind you, this is a small cyanotic patient as an example, but you can see that where we start with our patient and our prime is very close to a very narrow margin in between those things, providing that precision of the priming solution. So this is what that substrate allows us to do. So when we go on pump, comparing the patient and the first gas on pump, we can see very narrow margins of shifts of electrolytes, bicarb, and your pH status as well. Very important to kind of maintain that homeostasis and not have a big shift as we go on bypass for every patient. So one thing, as I mentioned, we're kind of psychotic about it, is cold osmotic pressure. We can look at this directly in the OR, spin down some plasma, look at the total serum solids using the optical refractometer. We have these in the OR. We use them very frequently to monitor this. If you look at in there, you'll see the little transition between the fluids there, and we get about a 4.8 on that scale. We can use the formulas that were developed by regression models by Minnie Blackwell and Jeff Riley at MEOC several years ago. Utilizing that formula, we can come up with a COP of our prime for this situation of about 15. Normal COP for an adult is around 21. So only a minor shift of our would be caused by our prime. Now, there was interesting studies done by Troy's group that demonstrated that anything below about a 15 millimeter mercury COP will automatically start shifting that fluid into the interstitial space and causing edema. So not just in the fluffy tissues of the face that you see in your patient, but every organ system in the body. So your gut, your liver, your kidney, the whole process. So you be careful and consider this as paramount. They did use a little bit different calculations discussed in the Blackwell paper as well, but once again, discussing the importance of maintaining osmotic pressure. So pressure, or mean arterial pressure, or perfusion pressure on bypass. This is a little bit nebulous. STS and the Society for Cardiovascular Anesthesiologists and AMSEC got together several years ago, provided us some guidelines, specifically in concerns for cardiac injury. Still a little nebulous, still a little concerning on where exactly the proper pressure is for patients on bypass. Dr. Brady gave a great presentation yesterday about the autoregulation pathways and how that can affect us as well. Really hope he gets a device we could use in real time that would be neat to see that kind of technology in the operating field. In adult populations, 60 to 80 was recommended by STS. We also have to think about the hydrostatic component. As your pressure goes up, maybe your COP is a little diluted. That further higher pressure automatically pushes fluids into your interstitial. And once again, we have a problem. This is just kind of a rundown of how we keep our pressures for most of our patients. See, as we go up in pressures, and accordingly for our adult populations, we see we manage our pressures on bypass about 60 to 70, according to the patient's needs. So flow, what is the right flow? For our institutional protocol, we maintain 2.4 liters per meter squared. Is that the right number? I'm not 100% confident. It seems to be. It works well for us. Jim Rieger's group in Cincinnati did a really neat study where they looked at patients, all patients across the board, using the 2.4 index and the 3.0 index. They found that the 3.0 index found less AKI in their patients. I had the kind of hard question of, so did you double size your cannulas? Or they claim not. But so that's an interesting approach that I think that maybe needs further investigation. Also, we have strong evidence now with the use of DO2 index. Where are we according to your hemoglobin management, your flow? Where are you in the safe zone? For adults, literature tells us above 270. And then also for pediatrics, there's some evidence coming out. We're in the 330 range. But nonetheless, looking at a dilutionary effect of going on bypass and how we might address that with flow, we need to be thinking about that during the whole case. There's new devices coming out that measure this real time for us so we can keep in tune with that during the whole case. So one thing also in adult congenital patients we have to think about is flow is not just the flow. With pump flow, minus your collateral blood flow is your actual flow. So when you get that, left atrial vent going at 3 liters, you're doing 5 liters over here, you're not supporting your patients well. You can see in this cath in the right chest, there are the massive collaterals coming through there. We have to account for that and accommodate for that. You can see all the fleas in the chest there. Those are not. They're actually occlusive devices for previously developed collateral. So you have to take this into account when we're talking about the adult congenitals that sometimes can be quite chronically cyanotic and develop such collaterals. This is an example of that variability. So once again, our protocol for our adult congenital patients is 2.4 cardiac index. That's that red line you see. The blue bars are the different flows for these patients. And that burnt orange, UT orange variable line here is our flow for these patients. So our cardiac index for these patients. So you can see there's a lot of variability that we need for this adult congenital population. Real quick, talk about endothelial glycocalyx. This is a bizarre thing that I never knew about until I found out about it, and then it's kind of blown my mind a little bit. So this is a layer on the inner surface of all the endovascular surfaces made up of proteoglycans, polysaccharides, hyaluronic acids, as a protective layer and a communication barrier between what the intervascular fluids and then the interstitial fluids into the endothelium. It's kind of a barrier blocker layer to carefully regulate those two communications. We can even see it under electron microscopy and proper staining. We can actually see this layer that separates and protects the endothelium from direct contact. For a simple-minded person like myself, I kind of think of it like this: fish slime. So fish actually have a mucus layer on their outer surface. If you've ever been fishing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You cannot get it off your hands. It's a very important process in fish. And I'm sorry, I'm just spending 2 seconds on fish. But that layer that's stripped off, that is a protective layer, immunological process of microbiological protections, fluid balance from the seawater to the fish's actual tissues. Very important layer. Same thing in our vasculature. If that's stripped away, we have direct communication between the fluids and the intravascular space and the interstitial space. So very important to consider out. Why did I put this? My son has the big fish. So what I'm talking about here is the breakdown of the endothelial glycocalyx. This can occur with a reduction of albumin in the prime to the intravascular space. Shear forces themselves, so excessive pressures, excessive flows, radical oxygen species. When we're running excessive PO2 in our patients, this actually releases more radical oxygen species. Some indicate that it could be as low as 185 millimeters of mercury oxygen. This in turn releases more nitric oxide from the endothelium and then breaks down the glycocalyx. What that happens then is free flow of colloids into the extravascular space, exposure of the endothelial cell surface, and this starts a process of initiating an immune response and complicating our coag system as well. So a minor thing we don't think about can have major complications. And I hope you understood kind of the thought on what we've been trying to talk about, the accuracy and precision in all our goals, defining goals very clearly, sticking within those goals very precisely. No joke, we talk about this every day during timeout. And we'll be running a pressure of 42 to 53, or even close 37 to 52. Very tight margins for this patient every day, all day in this. Understand the variables and mitigate those variables that can lead to these complications. So I think these are all key things that we can do behind the pump to facilitate what the surgeon and anesthesiologist are doing, come out with the best outcomes for these adult patients. Thank you for your time.